The human named Daniel worked as a mechanic on the edge of the alien colony. His days were long, filled with repairing engines, fixing tools, and checking machines that the aliens themselves found too strange or dangerous to touch. He liked his job because it kept him busy and away from politics, but fate never asks for permission, it just arrives. That night, the colony lights were dim, glowing blue against the steel walls. Daniel carried his toolkit and followed a narrow passage. He had been told a machine deep inside the alien temple had broken. It was unusual for him to be called there, but he didn't ask questions. Work was work, and humans like him didn't often get near sacred places. The hallway grew darker, lit only by faint symbols that pulsed on the walls. Strange sounds echoed, whispers, chants, the beating of drums far away. Daniel frowned, wondering if he had gone the wrong way. Still, he pushed forward, his boots echoing with each step. At the end of the hall stood a door carved with shining patterns. It slid open with a hiss when he touched it. He stepped inside, expecting gears and wires. Instead, his breath caught in his throat. The room was a chamber of light. Glowing crystals floated above a pool of silver water. In the center stood an alien girl, unclothed, her skin shining like pale starlight. She gasped, her large eyes widening as they met his. Her hands tried to cover herself, but it was too late. Daniel froze, horror rushing through him. He had walked into something forbidden, something private. The girl's voice shook as she whispered, "You saw me. You saw what no outsider should ever see." The air itself seemed to tremble with her words. Before Daniel could speak, the chamber shifted, symbols on the walls flared to life, burning brighter than fire. The pool rippled as if alive, sending waves of light toward him. He stumbled back, his tobe ox clattering to the floor. Pain shot through his arm as a mark, glowing and hot, appeared on his skin. The alien girl screamed, a sound filled with fear and anger. She clutched her chest where the same mark now glowed. The chamber had decided, they were bound. Daniel's mind raced. What had he done? He hadn't meant to intrude, he hadn't wanted this, but the mark burned as if it carried its own will. The girl's tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, now we are linked, forever." The chamber doors slammed shut behind him, trapping them both inside. Daniel tried to move, but the mark pulsed again, tying his breath with hers. He could feel her heartbeat in his chest, strong and fast. His voice cracked, "What is happening to me?" She stared at him with a mixture of rage and despair. "You saw me during the sacred shedding," she said, her voice trembling. "In my people's law, that means you are mine, and I am yours." The words struck him harder than any weapon. Daniel felt the weight of a future he never asked for pressing down on him. The alien girl fell to her knees, covering her face. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You fool, do you know what you've done? Now our species must bond forever." Daniel stood frozen in silence, his heart pounding. He had only come to fix a machine, but in one accident, he had stepped into a fate that would change both their lives. The chamber glowed brighter, as if sealing the truth, and Daniel realized there was no way back. The chamber finally released them, its doors sliding open with a heavy groan. Daniel almost ran outside, desperate for fresh air, but the alien girl followed, her glowing mark still burning on her chest. Guards stood waiting in the corridor, their long spears humming with energy. When they saw the glowing mark on both of them, their faces turned pale. One guard shouted, "The law has chosen. A binding has been made." The sound echoed through the passage like thunder. Daniel felt his knees weaken, not understanding, but the alien girl lowered her head in shame. She whispered, "It is too late, the temple has witnessed, the bond cannot be undone." The guards surrounded them, not with anger, but with fear and respect. They escorted the pair through twisting halls until they reached a grand hall. There, the alien council sat, elderly beings with silver eyes and long robes. They stared at Daniel as if he were a dangerous weapon left unlocked. The girl stood trembling beside him, unable to meet their gaze. An elder leaned forward, his voice like stone, "Human, do you know what you have done? By seeing her in the sacred state, you have invoked the law of bonding." Daniel shook his head, his voice shaking, "I didn't mean to. I was sent to fix a machine. I didn't know she was there." The hall erupted in murmurs, but the elder raised a hand, silencing them. "Intention does not matter. The chamber has marked you both, and that mark is eternal." Daniel's arm still burned faintly, a glowing symbol etched into his skin. He clenched his fist, wishing he could rip it out. The alien girl finally raised her voice, her tone sharp though her body trembled. I I do not accept this. He is not of our kind, he is not worthy to bond with me. Her words cut into Daniel, but he could hear the fear beneath them. This was not only her anger, it was her desperation to escape her fate. Another Older spoke, her voice softer but full of weight. Child, the bond has already sealed, your spirits are tied, your lives are joined. If one of you dies, the other will follow. This is the ancient truth, you cannot run from it, and you cannot deny it. The girl's eyes widened, and Daniel's stomach dropped. He wasn't only trapped in a law, he was trapped in her very survival. If she hated him, she was still bound to him, and if he walked into danger, she would be dragged with him. Daniel tried to argue. Again, this isn't fair, I'm human, I never asked for this. But the council only shook their heads. You are human, yes, but the chamber recognized you, it accepted you. This is rare, but not unheard of. The bond between species is dangerous, yet powerful. The choice was not yours, the choice was the law. The guard stepped forward again, this time with a more formal stance. You will be housed together from this day, watched, studied. Your bond must grow, or it will consume you both. Daniel looked at the girl, her fists were clenched, her jaw tight, her whole body shaking. She whispered to herself, why him? Why now? The council rose to their feet, ending the discussion. Take them to the chamber of bonded pairs, let them begin their fate. Daniel was shoved gently but firmly forward, the alien girl walking beside him in silence. Neither spoke, but their glowing marks pulsed in rhythm like two hearts beating the same song. As they entered a new chamber, smaller but lined with watching eyes, Daniel felt the weight of chains, not metal chains, but invisible ones. The bond was real, the law was unbreakable, and the worst part was, he didn't even know her name. The chamber of bonded pairs was quiet. Daniel and the alien girl were left alone inside, the heavy doors closing behind them. The air smelled of old stone and glowing crystals that pulsed with a strange light. The room was not a prison, but it felt like one. 2 beds, a single table, and walls lined with glowing runes. It was clear this place was built to hold more than just bodies, it was meant to hold fate. Daniel sat on one bed, his hands clutching his arm where the glowing mark still burned faintly. It wasn't just a symbol, it was alive. Every time he moved, it pulsed like a heartbeat, sometimes even in rhythm with his chest. He hated it, hated how it made him feel like he was not his own anymore. Across from him, the alien girl sat with her back turned, her long hair fell like a dark curtain, hiding her face. She was trembling, though she tried to hide it. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Look, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't even know what that chamber was. She didn't answer, her shoulders shook as she whispered, you ruined me, no one will see me the same now, my people will laugh, my family will turn away, and all because you walked into a place you did not belong. Daniel clenched his fists, his voice sharp, you think I wanted this? I didn't ask to be dragged into your laws, I was just doing my job. The mark on his arm flared suddenly, glowing brighter. He gasped and looked down, realizing the symbol was reacting to his emotions. At the same moment, the alien girl's chest glowed too. She winced and clutched it with both hands, her eyes lifted, locking onto his. For a moment, neither could move, both trapped by the strange burning connection. Daniel's breath caught. This mark, it ties us, doesn't it? She nodded slowly, her voice heavy with despair. It is the mark of binding, an ancient seal. It does not just show our bond, it makes us when you feel anger, I feel it. When you are hurt, I am hurt. When you are weak, I am weak. Her words made Daniel's stomach twist. He looked at the glowing skin and whispered, so we can't escape each other. Her bitter laugh was soft but sharp. Not even in death, human, not even then. Silence stretched between them until Daniel finally asked, what's your name? She blinked, as if the question startled her. After a long pause, she whispered, Lyra. Daniel nodded, repeating it quietly, Lyra. Then if we're bound, we need to figure this out, together. But Lyra shook her head, her voice breaking, no, this bond is a curse, it is not togetherness, it is a prison. One mistake tied us forever, and there is no escape. Before Daniel could argue, the walls of the chamber lit up again, the runes glowed and symbols swirled across the stone. A projection appeared, showing the image of 2 figures with the same glowing mark. A deep, echoing voice filled the chamber, the mark of binding has been witnessed, the bond will test. the bond will judge, survive together, or perish together. Daniel's throat went dry, Lyra's face turned pale as she stared at the projection. It begins, she whispered, the bond will test us soon. The mark on their bodies flared again, brighter this time, and Daniel felt it, her heartbeat racing inside his chest. Their lives were no longer their own, something greater was watching, and it was about to begin. Morning came slowly inside the alien city, the sound of bells echoed through the streets, calling people to gather in the main square. Daniel and Lyra were escorted there by guards, their glowing marks hidden under cloth but still burning faintly. The moment the crowd saw them, whispers began to rise like smoke. Look, she's bound to a human, one alien woman hissed, her voice dripping with disgust. How shameful, another sneered. No pure suitor will ever look at her again. Lyra's face flushed with red heat, her eyes locked on the ground. She tried to walk tall, but Daniel could see her hands trembling. Daniel hated the sound of their laughter. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them it wasn't his fault, but the guards pushed them forward, and the council awaited in the center of the square. Every eye was fixed on them, mocking, judging, waiting to see the spectacle. One elder spoke loudly for all to hear. The mark of binding has chosen what we could not. The girl Lyra is now joined with the outsider, the human Daniel. This is law, and law is stronger than blood. The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. Bound to a human, she is ruined forever. Perhaps the human is desperate, perhaps he begged for this. No, look at his face, he is terrified. Daniel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched. He could take insults thrown at him, but the way they mocked Lyra filled him with anger. She stood shaking beside him, her lips pressed tight, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. The shame cut her deeper than any weapon could. Daniel suddenly stepped forward, his voice sharp as steel. Enough, he shouted, his voice echoing across the square. The laughter fell silent for a moment. Surprised by his boldness, he looked around at them, his eyes burning. You laugh at her as if she chose this, but none of you saw what I did. The chamber itself decided. The mark appeared on me as much as it did on her. Mock her all you want, but mock me too, because I carry the same mark. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was rare for a human to speak so openly against them. Some sneered, others looked unsettled, but Lyra's head snapped toward him in shock. Her eyes widened, confusion and disbelief mixing with the shame she had carried moments before. The elder raised a hand, silencing the noise again. Human, you speak boldly, but you do not understand the weight of this. A bond between species is seen as weakness. You will face mockery, you will face trials, and many will wish for your death. Daniel didn't back down, his chest rising with each breath. Then let them wish, but I won't let her stand alone. If this bond means we share pain, then I'll take hers too. The crowd grew silent again. For the first time, the mocking eyes turned uncertain. They had expected the human to break, to deny, to run. Instead, he stood beside Lyra, not as a stranger, but as someone claiming his place. Lyra's throat tightened, and she looked away. She didn't want to admit it, but his words had struck her heart. For so long she had thought of him only as the cause of her shame, but in that moment, she saw something else: defiance, strength, and a strange kind of honor. The elder spoke again, his tone final. Mockery will not change the truth. The bond is sealed, and soon the trial of unity will come. Survive it, or both of you will be erased. This is your fate. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers chasing them through the square, but Daniel and Lyra stood in silence, the mark on their bodies pulsing together. For the first time, she felt a spark of something besides shame, something dangerous, something she couldn't yet name. Daniel and Lyra were taken back to the chamber after the council meeting. The air felt heavier than before, thick with silence. The guards left them with food and water but gave no comfort. The door locked behind them with a heavy sound, reminding them they had no choice. Two beds stood at opposite sides of the room. Daniel threw his bag onto one and sat down. Lyra sat on the other, her back turned as if even looking at him was unbearable. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the glow of the marks on their skin. Daniel tried to distract himself, fixing a loose strap on his boots, but every time he moved, the mark pulsed. Sometimes it was faint, sometimes it burned, and every time it flared, he noticed Lyra flinch too, as if sharing the pain. Finally, Daniel sighed. We can't just sit here like this. If we're stuck, then we should at least talk. Lyra's voice was cold. There is nothing to say. You are a stranger, a human, an outsider, and now a curse on my life. Daniel clenched his teeth, anger rising, but before he could reply, the mark burned again. Both of them gasped, clutching the same spot on their skin. Their pain echoed together, leaving them both breathless. Daniel stared at her, realizing something. Every time we fight, it gets worse, he said. Lyra's lips pressed tight, but she didn't deny it. It is the mark, she admitted softly. It feeds on discord. The more we resist each other, the stronger it burns. If we do not learn to balance, it will consume us both. The thought chilled Daniel more than the stone walls ever could. He rubbed his arm, whispering, "So, what then? Do we pretend to like each other?" Her sharp laugh echoed bitterly. "You think liking matters? This is not about liking, human, it is survival, and survival means you stay near me, no matter how much I despise it." That night, the silence returned. Daniel lay awake on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint glow of the runes danced across the walls, but he couldn't sleep, not with the bond pulling at his chest like invisible chains. At some point, he closed his eyes, and then it happened. A vision flickered in his mind, not his own but hers. He saw Lyra as a child, small and fragile, standing alone while others mocked her. He heard her mother's voice fading into silence. He felt her loneliness as if it were carved into his bones. Daniel sat up with a start, gasping for air. Across the room, Lyra stirred, her eyes wet with tears. She had seen his memory too, his long nights of labor, his quiet meals in isolation, his ache for family he had lost. Their lives had bled into each other's dreams. Lyra turned her face away quickly, ashamed. "You saw too much," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel spoke quietly, "I didn't mean to, but maybe this is what the bond does. Maybe we can't hide from each other anymore." Her silence was heavy, but she didn't argue. The bond pulsed again, softer this time, not burning but steady. It felt like the chamber itself approved of their moment of honesty. The next morning, guards entered again. "Time to move," one barked. Lyra frowned. "Where are you taking us?" The guard smirked. "To the outer walls. If you're bound, then you'll face danger together, survive the threat outside, or die as one." Daniel's chest tightened. Unwanted togetherness was no longer about sleeping in the same room or sharing dreams. Now it meant standing shoulder to shoulder against whatever waited in the dark. The gates of the city opened with a deep grinding sound. Cold wind rushed in, carrying dust and the smell of the wild beyond. Daniel and Lyra were pushed forward by guards, their glowing marks hidden beneath their clothes but pulsing all the same. Ahead stretched a barren wasteland, jagged rocks rising like broken teeth under a blood-red sky. "Stay alive," one guard muttered, almost like a cruel joke. The gates closed behind them with a heavy slam, sealing them outside. For the first time, Daniel realized they were completely alone. No walls, no council, no crowd of watchers, just the silence of the wild and the bond tying them together. Lyra scanned the horizon, her eyes sharp. Her people knew the dangers beyond the city. "Out here," she whispered, "the creatures smell fear. They will come for us, and they will test the bond. If we are not one, we die." Daniel swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the small blade the guards had given him. It felt pathetic compared to the threats she described. But he wasn't about to show weakness, not when Lyra already doubted him. "We'll make it," he said firmly, though doubt gnawed at his stomach. Hours passed as they walked across the wasteland. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long across the ground. Daniel felt the bond pulse harder the further they went. It was as if the land itself was pressing against them, testing their steps. Suddenly, Lyra froze, her ears twitching. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. Daniel strained, and then he heard it too. A low growl carried by the wind, the sound of claws scraping stone echoed all around them. Shapes began to move in the distance, crawling closer. From the shadows came creatures with black hides and glowing red eyes, their jaws split wide, filled with rows of sharp teeth. Daniel gripped his blade tighter, his heart pounding. "Tell me they're not as fast as they look," he muttered. Lyra's voice was grim. "They are faster." The first beast lunged, its body twisting like liquid shadow. Daniel swung his blade clumsily, managing to cut across its hide. It screeched, more angry than hurt. At the same time, Lyra leapt forward with sharp alien movements. Her strikes were precise, trained, but even she was barely keeping them back. The bond flared suddenly, bright and burning. Daniel stumbled, feeling not only his own fear but hers too. Their hearts pounded in sync, their breaths caught together, and then, strangely, his blade grew steadier. He moved in rhythm with her, as if the bond itself was guiding his hand. Together, they cut down the first wave, but more shadows slithered out from the rocks, surrounding them. Daniel gasped, sweat dripping down his face. There are too many, he said. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then we fight until the bond decides if we are worthy. The creatures circled closer, glowing eyes fixed on them. Daniel felt the bond burn hotter, almost painful. He shouted through clenched teeth, if this thing wants unity, then fine, Lyra, guide me. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. Left strike, now, duck, behind you. Daniel followed her voice, moving when she moved, striking where she directed. The bond pulsed brighter with each step. It was no longer just pain, it was strength. Their movements blended together until it looked as if they were one. At last, the beasts hesitated, snarling but backing away. They circled once more, then fled into the shadows, leaving only silence behind. Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. His blade shook in his hand, but he was alive. Beside him, Lyra leaned on her knees, her chest rising fast. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lyra whispered, almost to herself, the bond, it saved us. Daniel looked at her, sweat dripping from his brow. Or maybe we saved each other, he said, his voice rough but steady. The wasteland fell quiet again, but they both knew the truth. This was only the first test, and the real threat outside was not just the beasts. It was the bond itself, pulling them closer in ways neither of them could fight. Night fell over the wasteland, the air grew colder, and the sky burned with strange alien stars. Daniel and Lyra built a small fire using dry roots and broken stone, the flames weak but enough to hold back the shadows. They sat across from each other, their faces lit by the flickering glow. The bond between them pulsed faintly, no longer burning with pain but beating like a second heart. Every so often, Daniel would feel a shiver that wasn't his, or a sigh that came from her. It was strange, uncomfortable, yet somehow grounding. He couldn't escape her presence, not even in silence. Lyra wrapped her arms around her knees, staring into the fire. Her voice was soft, heavy with exhaustion. In my people's law, touching a bonded one outside of ritual is forbidden. The bond grows too strong, too fast. It can consume everything. Daniel frowned, leaning closer. So what happens if we do? Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp but uncertain. The bond reacts. It pulls tighter. It feeds on the closeness. If we're not careful, it could trap us in ways worse than chains. He leaned back, but the words stuck in his mind. Forbidden, dangerous, yet tempting, because despite the fear, Daniel could not ignore the way her voice trembled, not with anger, but with something she was trying to hide. The night grew colder, the fire shrank, and Daniel's breath turned to mist. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter, but it wasn't enough. Lyra noticed, her mark pulsing faintly in response to his discomfort. Finally, she whispered, if you freeze, I freeze too. The bond doesn't care for rules. Daniel glanced at her, his lips pressed tight. So what are you saying? She hesitated, then muttered, sit closer. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Daniel moved slowly, unsure, until their shoulders brushed head. The moment their skin touched, the bond exploded with heat. The mark on his arm flared bright, mirrored by the glow on her chest. Both of them gasped, their breath catching at the same time. It wasn't just warmth, it was a rush of feeling. Daniel felt her heartbeat inside his chest, strong and fast. He felt her fear, her shame, her hidden longing for safety, and she felt his exhaustion, his stubborn strength, his quiet ache for belonging. It was overwhelming, raw, and undeniable. Lyra pulled back quickly, her face pale. No, we can't, she whispered, shaking her head. Daniel's voice was low but steady. We didn't choose this, but maybe fighting it makes it worse. Her eyes filled with conflict, torn between law and survival. She whispered again, if we let it grow too strong, the bond will rule us, not the other way around. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze firm. Maybe it already does. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of fire. Lyra looked away, hiding the tremble of her lips. For the first time, she wasn't mocking or angry, she was vulnerable, and that scared her more than any beast in the wasteland. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A distant roar echoed across the rocks, shaking the fire into sparks. Daniel stood quickly, his hand gripping his blade. What now? He muttered, his nerves on edge. Lyra rose beside him, her mark glowing faintly in rhythm with his. The bond called it, she whispered, her voice heavy with dread, it reacts to our closeness, and now. Something has heard, from the darkness, glowing eyes appeared again, larger this time, not the same beasts as before, something bigger, stronger, drawn by the flare of their connection. Daniel's chest tightened, his heart racing with hers. The forbidden touch had awakened more than just their emotions, it had awakened the wasteland itself. The roar shook the wasteland, the fire collapsed into sparks as the ground cracked under heavy steps. From the shadows emerged a towering alien warrior, armored in bone and steel, his eyes glowing with fury. He carried a long spear tipped with a blade that shimmered like liquid fire. Daniel tightened his grip on his small blade, but it looked pathetic compared to the warrior's weapon. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, her body stiff. She knew this figure. Karn, she whispered, her voice heavy with dread. He is the rival, the one who wanted me before the bond chose you. Karn's voice thundered, echoing across the stones. Lyra, you dishonor your people, binding with a human, but fate is not final. I will end this mockery now, I will kill him, and the bond will shatter, leaving you free. The words hit Daniel like cold steel. This wasn't just another beast from the wild, this was a warrior with purpose, one who wanted him dead for reasons deeper than survival. Lyra stepped forward, her fists clenched. No, Karn, the bond cannot be broken that way. If he dies, I die too. Her voice shook, but her defiance burned bright. Daniel's chest tightened at her words. She hadn't admitted it before, but she cared enough to speak. Karn only laughed, the sound cruel and sharp. Then you will both fall together, and your shame will be erased. With a sudden leap, he struck forward, his spear cutting the air with deadly speed. Daniel barely dodged, the weapon scraping the ground where he had stood. The impact cracked stone, sending dust flying. He stumbled back, his blade shaking in his hand. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath. The bond flared bright, his chest burning as if fire pulsed inside. Through it, Lyra's voice cut into his mind, not spoken, but felt. Move left, strike now. Daniel reacted without thinking, rolling aside and slashing upward. His BL Ade nicked Karn's armor, leaving only a scratch, but it was enough to shock him. The warrior's eyes narrowed. So the bond guides you. That will not save you for long. The fight continued, sparks flying as Karn's spear clashed with Daniel's blade. Daniel was slower, weaker, but the bond moved him when his instincts failed. Every time he faltered, Lyra's strength flowed into him, her will pushing his body forward. But every strike carried weight, each hit drained him, sweat dripping, lungs burning. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. Karn was a warrior born, and he was just a mechanic dragged into fate. Lyra's voice rang again, sharper this time. Stop fighting like a human, trust me. Daniel clenched his jaw, but he listened. He shifted his stance, not resisting the pull of the bond. Suddenly his movements matched hers, his strikes timed with her breaths. Together, they flowed like one being. Karn growled as Daniel's blade found a weak spot, cutting across his arm. The warrior staggered, rage flashing in his eyes. You, human, you dare. Daniel stood firm, panting. I didn't ask for this fight, but I won't let you take her. His voice was rough, but steady, and though he barely believed his own words, the bond pulsed with approval. Karn roared and charged one last time, spear raised for a killing blow. Daniel braced himself, his blade ready but shaking. At the last second, Lyra leapt forward, placing her hand on Daniel's arm. The bond ignited, their marks blazing with searing light. Their strike came together, human strength and alien fire, slamming against Karn's chest. The warrior was thrown back, his armor cracking, his body crashing against the rocks. He groaned but did not rise, his spear broken in half beside him. The wasteland grew silent again. The fight over, Daniel fell to one knee, gasping. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand still on his arm. Their marks dimmed slowly, pulsing in unison. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Her whisper was soft but steady. Without the bond, you would have fallen, but with it, you stood. Daniel managed a weak smile. Maybe I'm starting to believe this bond isn't just a curse. But in her heart, Lyra knew the challenge wasn't over. Defeating Karn was only the beginning, and the council would not ignore what had just happened. The wasteland was silent after Karn's defeat. The broken warrior lay among the rocks, groaning but too weak to rise. Daniel's chest burned with every breath, sweat dripping down his face. The bond still pulsed faintly, keeping him steady when his body wanted to collapse. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes locked on the glowing mark across his arm. It was dim now, but its rhythm matched hers perfectly. She couldn't deny it anymore. The bond had saved them both. Without him, she would have been torn apart by beasts or crushed by Karn's spear. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire they had built earlier had gone out, leaving only cold starlight above. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice rough. So this is my life now, huh? Fighting warriors and monsters just because of a mistake. Lyra's lips tightened, guilt flickering in her eyes. She whispered, "It was not only a mistake, Daniel. The bond is rare, it chooses, and when it does, it changes everything. I spent my life laughing at the stories, thinking they were only myths. But now I live inside one, and it frightens me." Daniel leaned back against the rock, his tired body aching. "I don't know your laws. I don't know your people, but I know this. When I stood against Karn, I didn't fight just for me, I fought because the thought of you dying scared me more than anything else." Lyra's eyes widened, her throat tightening. The bond flared at his words, warm instead of burning. She pressed her hands against her chest, whispering, "Don't say things like that. It makes the bond stronger." Daniel gave a small smile. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." Her heart pounded in her chest, and she shook her head. "You don't understand, Daniel. If the bond grows too strong, it will tie not only our lives but our souls. It will make us one in ways we cannot undo. You will see every part of me, the shame, the fear, the weakness, and I will see yours." Daniel's eyes softened, his voice low. "Then maybe that's what we need, because I've already seen your strength, and it's the only reason I'm alive. If there's shame or fear inside you, I'd rather share it than let you carry it alone." Her breath caught, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. Her people had mocked her, called her weak. Karn had treated her like a prize to be won, but this human, this outsider. He spoke as if her worth was not in her power, but in her being. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed to show weakness, but Daniel reached out, his hand trembling. He hesitated, remembering her warning about forbidden closeness, yet the bond pulled him forward, his hand brushing against hers. The mark flared again, brighter than before. Lyra gasped, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Her tears fell freely now, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered, almost broken, "I do not hate the bond anymore, because of you." Daniel froze, stunned by her words. He searched her eyes, and for the first time, there was no wall between them, no anger, no mockery, only truth. Her confession was small, fragile, but it was real. "I thought it ruined me," she said softly, "but maybe it gave me someone I never knew I needed." Daniel's throat tightened, and he whispered back, "Then maybe it gave me the same thing." The stars above burned brighter. The bond pulsed in steady rhythm, no longer a chain of pain but a bridge between two hearts. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. Trials, judgment, perhaps even death. But in that moment, under the Ollie N sky, the human and the alien girl shared the truth neither could deny anymore. They were no longer bound by accident, they were bound by choice. The next morning, the wasteland was quiet. Daniel and Lyra sat by the dying embers of their fire, both exhausted from the night before. Neither spoke much, but the bond carried their emotions anyway, his determination, her worry, their shared exhaustion. It was as if silence no longer meant distance, only unspoken words. Then the ground shook again, but not from beasts or Karn. This time, it was the sound of alien engines. A group of council guards approached in a shining transport, dust kicking up around it. The heavy doors opened, and the eldest of the council stepped out, his silver eyes fixed on them. "You survived," the elder said, his tone unreadable. "Few pairs endure the trial of the wild, yet the bond has kept you alive. Now, a choice must be made." Daniel frowned, his hand tightening on his blade. "What choice?" The elder's gaze shifted between them. "The law binds you forever, but there is one path to break it, a ritual that can cut the bond, returning you to freedom. But the price is heavy. The pain will scar your bodies, and your spirits will never be whole again. It is the only way." Lyra's breath caught, her eyes flashing with fear and hope together. She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. "If we do it, you will no longer be tied to me. You can return to your life, free from our law. You could walk away." Daniel felt the mark pulse hard against his skin. He thought of everything, the accident, the shame, the battles, the forbidden touch. her confession. He thought of the way she looked when she stood against Karn, trembling but unbroken, and the way she whispered that maybe the bond wasn't a curse anymore. The elder continued, his voice sharp, you must decide before the next moonrise. If you choose freedom, the bond is cut forever. If you choose to remain, then you belong to each other until death. Daniel looked at Lyra, her eyes were on him. But they were full of fear, not fear of death, but of what he would choose. Her lips trembled as she whispered, if you want freedom, take it, I will not stop you. The bond pulsed again, heavy with her sorrow. Daniel could feel it, raw and sharp like a knife. He realized she was bracing herself for the pain of losing him. Her people had mocked her, her rival had tried to kill him, and now the council offered her last humiliation. Being abandoned by the one tied to her. He stepped closer, his voice steady though his heart raced. I didn't ask for this bond, Lyra, but I won't break it either, not because the law says I can't, because I won't. You're worth more than their shame, more than their mockery. I'm not leaving you. Her eyes widened, tears forming again. You would give up your freedom, for me? Daniel smiled faintly, tired but firm. Maybe freedom isn't about being alone anymore, maybe it's about choosing who you stand with. The elder's expression hardened. You are certain? This is your last chance. Daniel's voice was unwavering. I'm certain. The council guards shifted uneasily, murmurs spreading among them. It was rare for anyone, human or alien, to choose the bond willingly, but Daniel had spoken with no hesitation. Lyra's heart raced, the bond pulsing bright and warm. For the first time, she let herself truly meet his gaze, not as a prisoner of fate, but as someone chosen. Her whisper carried through the silence, then we are no longer bound by law, Daniel, we are bound by us. The elder turned away, his robes sweeping the dust. Then so be it, you have made your choice. From this day forward, you are one, together in honor, or together in ruin. As the sun set over the wasteland, Daniel and Lyra stood side by side. The bond glowed faintly on their skin, steady and alive. The choice had been made, and whatever waited next, they would face it together. The wasteland wind howled as the elder's words faded. Daniel and Lyra stood together, their glowing marks dim but steady. The guards led them back through the city gates, where crowds were already gathering. Whispers spread like fire. They chose the bond, the human accepted it. She will never be free now. The square filled with noise, half mocking, half fearful, yet Daniel did not flinch. He walked with his head high, his arm brushing against Lyra's. Every step reminded him that the bond was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat they shared. The council raised their hands for silence. The elder's voice boomed across the square. By law and by choice, the bond is sealed. From this day, the human Daniel and the daughter Lyra are one, not by accident, not by force, but by their own will. Gasps echoed through the crowd. No one had expected him to stay, no one had expected a human to choose a fate that even aliens feared, and yet here he was, standing without regret. Lyra's heart raced as she looked at him. Her shame had once been chains around her neck, but now, as Daniel's presence pressed warm against her through the bond, she felt something different. Not shame, but strength. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the crowd. It was Karn, wounded but alive, carried by others. His voice was hoarse but burning with hatred. This is not honor. The bond is a lie. Break it, or I will kill you both. The crowd stirred in fear. Guards rushed forward, but Daniel stepped ahead before they could. His voice was strong, echoing across the square. You already tried, Karn, but no matter how many times you come, I won't back down. Not from you, not from anyone. The bond pulsed bright, glowing through their clothes. The marks on Daniel's arm and Lyra's chest flared together. The crowd gasped as the light spread across the stones, filling the square with a radiant glow. It was not pain this time, it was power. Lyra gasped, her body trembling. The bond, it's awakening fully, she whispered. Daniel felt it too, the strength in his chest, the fire in his veins, the certainty that he was no longer just himself. He was part of her, and she of him. The elder lifted his hands again, awe in his voice. The eternal bond, he declared, it is rare, but it is true. When chosen freely, the bond does not enslave, it empowers. Together, they are stronger than alone. Together, they are eternal. The light dimmed slowly, leaving silence in its wake. The crowd, once mocking, now bowed their heads in quiet respect. Even Karn, though seething with rage, could not move against the force he had just witnessed. Daniel turned to Lyra, his hand reaching for hers. This time, she did not pull away. their fingers intertwined, and the bond pulsed steady and calm. She whispered softly, so only he could hear, "I thought this would be the end of me. But with you, it feels like the beginning." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then let's begin it together." The council declared the ceremony complete. The people dispersed, whispers chasing the air, but Daniel and Lyra remained at the center, two figures once tied by accident, now joined by choice. As night fell and the stars returned, the bond glowed softly beneath their skin, not a curse, not a chain, but a promise. Whatever dangers came, beasts, rivals, or even the council itself, they would face them side by side. And in the quiet of that moment, Daniel understood something deeper than law. The bond was not about what he had seen in that chamber, it was about what he saw now, a future where he was no longer alone, where two hearts beat as one, forever.